Here's white versus the Sicilian, the dragon variation. This is lesson 11, part 1. This is Adams versus Rocha. And e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, g6, bishop e3, bishop g7, f3, black castles, queen d2, knight c6, white castles queenside, d5. Black seeks counterplay in the center. He has no wish to be down by a kingside attack as the game above. He has no wish to be mowed down by a kingside attack as in the games above. E takes d5, knight takes d5, knight takes c6. Now, this is the correct capture. It would be silly to play something else like knight takes d5, because after queen takes d5, the black queen is nicely centralized and a2 is already hanging. B takes c6, bishop d4. You might think it a little odd, but white is actually keen to provoke e7, e5, as then the bishop on g7 is shut in. e5. Now, white has some edge after bishop takes d4, queen takes d4, queen c7, bishop c4, knight b6, bishop e2, etc. Now, another line, let me back up a minute, here is knight takes c3, followed by queen takes e3, bishop h6 check, bishop e3, and definitely not king b1, e5. Bishop e3, bishop takes e3 check, queen takes e3, queen b6, queen takes e7, bishop e6, queen a3, and white has good chances to consolidate his extra pawn. So now let's back up, and we have e5. Bishop c5. The bishop finds a safe niche in the black pawn structure and attacks the rook, but bishop e6, knight e4. No doubt you were wondering why we don't just snaffle the exchange with bishop takes f8. Once again, we need to recall the words from the introduction to this chapter. Due to the exchange of his d4 pawn, white is slightly weak on the dark squares in the Sicilian. This weakness has been enlarged by black putting his bishop on g7, and also by the fact that white has castled queenside, which makes the a1 h8 diagonal of greater strategic significance. If white were to play here bishop takes f8, he would be giving up the chief defender of his dark squares. Can he afford to be without the bishop given the circumstance? After queen takes f8, now leaving aside the shot of black moving bishop to leaving aside the shot of black moving to bishop h6, which now wins the white queen. There is the savage positional threat of an attack on b2 from the front with moves like rook b8 and queen b4, combined with pressure along the diagonal after knight takes c3, and also black playing e5 d4, or even e5 to e4 without the exchange on c3. Hence, white should avoid taking on f8, at least for the time being. Putting the knight on e4 is an astute decision, as it rules out knight takes black making the move knight takes c3, and it also blocks the e5 e4 advance. Of course, black should try evicting the knight. Black could try evicting the knight with a move like f5, but this can be answered by white playing knight to g5, hitting on the bishop on e6. Rook e8. So white gets no second chance to grab the exchange. h4. Hoping for a typical dragon wipeout down the h-file after h5, etc. h6. Black prepares to block the kingside pawn structure. He also rules out knight g5, so that black's move of f5 becomes an option. g4, queen c7. So what about f5? Well, after g takes f5, g takes f5, knight d6, black would be in big trouble. For example, bishop to f8, rook g1 check, king h7, knight takes e8, bishop takes c5. When a rook and knight are hanging, there is the threat. When a rook and knight are hanging, and there is a threat of black playing bishop e3. But here white plays rook g7 check, king h8, and queen takes h6 checkmate.